we have today Chief Economist Jamie Lane from AirDNA and myself, Francois, the co-founder and CEO of Enso, where we're going to dive into the data-driven strategies that separate high-performing properties from the competition that is out there. You're going to learn how to leverage AirDNA's data and analytics to optimize your profitability. And then we're also going to look at some top dollar revenue streams that people are implementing to further increase that profitability. What you're learning: individual property performance analysis, so how to benchmark your property's performance against the last 12 months of market data, calculating your property's revenue potential, what you could earn if optimized for revenue, and then a few secrets of some of these high-performing short-term rental operators. We've picked the creme de la creme when it comes to vacation rental managers, and in 3 very different locations. Quick introduction on Enso Connect. We are here to streamline and monetize your guest experience, your guest management, and your guest communication. We do this with a boarding pass, which is a guest web app that we're going to send to your guests that's going to navigate them through every stage of the guest journey, from upsells to check-in, verification, guidebooks, you name it. And then a unified inbox or messaging platform that allows you to interact with those guests across all of these different streams.
AirDNA are a global short-term rental data and analytics platform. We collect data on the earnings of really every short-term rental around the world. And then we provide that data in a way to help you make decisions around where to invest, how to optimize your property, how to manage your revenue and pricing going forward, and really just give you the data behind the decisions that you need to make on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to do a really quick overview on US and European short-term rental performance. So we're going to go really quick, just give you a high-level view before we dive into these really fun examples. And we're going to be doing live demos of comparing these properties to their competition. So who knows what's going to happen during a live demo. But starting, and one of my favorite things to look at when just getting a sense of like what's going on with short-term rentals is what's happening with demand. Are people still traveling? And on the left, we've got the United States, and on the right, Europe. And you see very different responses to, and both were growing very strong up into the pandemic. Both US and Europe saw pretty substantial declines, Europe more than the US. US came back much quicker in terms of demand, really slowed in 2023. And we've seen a little bit of reacceleration in 2024. Europe was very slow in terms of demand in 2022, 2023, and then really pushed on the accelerator in 2024. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why. But when we look at what we've seen in terms of the US, I've got all my KPIs here, both historical and going forward. The big theme from 2021 through to 2024 was declining occupancy. Really, supply was outpacing demand. That has slowed in 2024 into 2025, where demand and supply are roughly growing at the same rate. A big piece of that is how much supply growth has slowed. So we're growing more than 20% in 2022. In the most recent months of 2025, we're growing at about 4% growth. So less than a quarter. And for all of us existing hosts out there, that's great. Like, we're seeing less competition going in. And with those declining occupancies, we were seeing rate declines really in the back half of 2022 into 2023 and through the beginning of 2024. And throughout the US, we have seen rates turn back positive, though a portion of that is just from a lot of the new supply that's coming in is from nicer, better amenitized and larger listings, which is pushing the average guest paid rate up. And this is that trend. And one of the things I like to sort of share with people is don't fight the trend. If guests are looking for nicer amenities, nicer properties, larger properties, and coming into short-term rentals might not be to go after a budget 1-bedroom property in the city. So one of the things I like to suggest to people is look at the trends in your market. What are the type of properties that are getting higher occupancy than others? What are the type of properties that are seeing the most growth in new bookings versus others? And that can sort of point you to where guest trends, and specifically around how people are really using short-term rentals today. During the pandemic, we saw a big trend towards midterm and longer term stays. That has really started to trend it back now with shorter term stays, but still seeing really strong demand and larger listings. One of the other trends that we've seen, and this looks at spending by Americans and how much foreign outbound spend they're doing in green. And we see overall Americans are spending 47% more when they travel overseas than prior to the pandemic, which is crazy. Because when you look at foreign travelers coming into the US, it's roughly flat versus 2019. And that has a big implication for urban stays in the US, which really cater to foreign travelers, where urban markets are still really struggling. On the opposite side, we've seen European markets really benefit from this massive increase in Americans traveling overseas. And that's sort of my transition into looking at Europe, where we've seen occupancy continue to outpace prior years. Most recent data point in February, we're at 54%, which is the highest February we've reported. Not a super popular trying to travel to Europe, but I think a positive trend nonetheless. And you see in orange where 2024 was broadly very strong compared to 2019 levels and well exceeded 2019 levels of occupancy. So overall, we've been seeing very positive demand trends in Europe. That said, we have seen booking lead times declining. So as you think about managing revenue within your property, and with all those Americans typically booking really far out in advance for that European trip, that's not exactly what we've been seeing in terms of lead times. We're actually seeing lead times in 2024 averaging around 25 days ahead of time, so roughly a month, where when you look at what was happening in 2019, it was over 40 days, so a month and a half. So that reduction in lead time means it's harder to continue to push rate if you don't know who's actually booking and whether bookings are strong or not. And we've seen booking lead times actually weaken from 2022 to 2023 into 2024. So something to keep an eye on of, yes, the demand's been there, but people are booking not as far in advance. So now we're going to go into some of these examples. We're going to go through 3 property examples, one in France, one in Phoenix, and then another in Norway. So we're going to get a really good mix of different type of properties. And so just to give you a sense, the property we're going to be looking at in Toulouse, France, 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, 4 guests, 63% occupancy, 173 ADR, luxury apartment. Then we're going to go to Phoenix, where we're going to look at a 7-bedroom luxury home, 82% occupancy, 1,500 ADR. So really luxury property. And then we're going to go to this apartment, mid-scale apartment in Norway, in Bergen, 4-bedroom, 1 bath, fits 7 guests, ran 83% occupancy. So really give you a mix of different type of properties and how to benchmark your competition there. So now we're going to dig into this amazing, incredible hypercenter loft in Toulouse. So you see here, I've clicked and found the property. One thing that's really exciting is you can see their historical performance. We're going to start with the market. So we've gone into Toulouse. I'm actually I had been playing with some filters, so I'm going to get rid of those filters. But what it starts you with is high level, how this market's been performing over the past 12 months. So we're seeing annual revenue up about 3%, occupancy up 3%, RevPAR up about 4% off of no growth in average daily rate. We talked about overall European occupancy. One of the great things you can actually do is as you go into really any market around the world, we can see how that market's occupancy. So is occupancy increasing or decreasing compared to the last few years? So here I can see that February occupancy was actually relatively strong comparatively. And then one of my favorite things to start as I'm evaluating a market is how is supply growing? So February 2025 in the market of Toulouse, we have 3.6 thousand listings. And I can go back and look at February of last year. There was roughly 3.3 thousand. And we can look at that makeup of listings. So mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms in this market. So given that my property in Toulouse is a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, I now want to go in and find those comparable 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath properties for me to compare myself to. So what I'm going to start with doing is switching over to the listings tab. And then we have these really powerful filters where I can go in and start finding my competitors. So given it's mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms and there's a lot of 2-bedroom properties, I'm going to just compare myself with other 2 bedrooms. I really don't care about the bathrooms, but I do care about that I'm looking at other entire home properties and apartment condos type, because that's the type of listing I have. I'm then going to apply that. I see we now have 1,000 properties that sort of meet that criteria. I can then dig in a little bit further of performance. So here I know that this property is luxury. So it's on the higher end of the ADR scale for 2-bedroom properties, given that it earned 173 euro ADR over the past year. So I'm going to filter to luxury. I could filter to professionally managed or not. I'm going to keep it both so I can get a mix of my competition. I do want, given that this is a full-time property and I really only want full-time comps, I'm going to limit it to just days available greater than 270. And then I also want to find properties that have enough reviews to make me feel confident that they've been operating for some time. So I'm going to say more than 20 reviews. I'm now going to apply that. And now I get 48 listings that is identified that are amazing comps. And what makes me feel even better is prior to this, I had actually hearted our subject property here. So I see it came up in one of my comps. And when I scroll over it, I can actually see where that property is on the platform. And as I zoom in, you're actually going to see the number of comps actually change. I can still see where my subject property is here. So now I can go in and find nearby properties and add them to my comp set. And how I do that is I hit the heart. I can then create a new set. And now I'm going to go to Toulouse comps, hit save. And now I'm going to actually go in and find other comparable properties and add them to that comp set. And this is going to allow me to find properties that are comparable. Right now, I'm sorting it by revenue, and I want to get a good mix of properties that I think are actually comparable. If I wasn't under sort of the time constraint of this, and what I'd be doing is going in and look at each of these properties. What are the amenities they have? Where are they located exactly? And making sure that they're really comparable to the property that I'm wanting to compare it to. And then as I evaluate each of those, I can then add them to my comp list. For me, getting a comp list, I really want to have at least about 5, 6 properties that I want to be able to compare my subject to. So I can really get a good solid averages on the occupancy ADR side. And in creating these comps, this is great for comparing an existing property, but it could also be great for comparing a new investment property as well, given that I can find properties comparable to what I'm looking to actually invest in. So now that I've created that comp set, I can then go to my saved lists and go to my STR listings, scroll down to my Toulouse comps, where I have 5 properties in it. So now this Toulouse comp, we know my subject property was generating about 40,000 euros in annual revenue at a $174 or euro ADR at a 63% occupancy. So now when I go in and look at my comps, so I'm comparing these top line numbers, I can see in general, my property is getting a much higher ADR and actually slightly lower, 10% lower occupancy. But with that strategy, actually generating a higher average annual revenue over the past 12 months. So then what I can do is compare my property's performance relative to ADRs and occupancies. So it does look like this set is generating relatively high occupancies throughout the entire year, maybe not as high or relatively high in the off season compared to my comp. And what's also great is all my comps were available for the full 12 months. So this really helps me sort of dial in, and then I can see for each of these properties what they actually earned over the past 12 months, how many days they're available, and what their actual occupancy and ADRs are. And if I want to remove them, I could just unheart them and see what the new aggregate performance is. So this a great property outperforming its competition. Now I'm going to move to the Phoenix listing. So here we've got that property up. We show that it earned roughly $450,000 last year, 82% occupancy at a $1,500 ADR. And again, I'm going to start with going into my market because we do have, Phoenix is a very competitive market for short-term rentals. And here I can see there's 21,000 active short-term rentals in the Phoenix market. But maybe before I dig in, I want to dig into just my submarket. So for this property, I know that it's actually in the Paradise Valley submarket. And when I click over to submarkets, I actually get the boundaries of all the submarkets. I can zoom in. This property is just north of Scottsdale in Paradise Valley. So I can click on that submarket. Now see all the properties sort of competing in that submarket, and this dot is going to provide any property that was active over the past 12 months. And then I can start looking into the specific performance of this market, how occupancy has been changing. But because each tier can really operate really differently, so here we see 2025 have started really strong in the Paradise Valley submarket. I want to start looking at these trends for just large luxury properties. And I'm going to keep it 6+ bedrooms. And then I also want to do just luxury properties. And I want to get a sense of, for those large luxury properties, how is occupancy trending? And I see it's still higher than in prior years, but maybe not quite as high as when I was looking at the entire submarket. So 61%. Overall, though, RevPARs have been up very strong on a year-over-year basis. So Phoenix looks to be doing well, at least in this submarket and in this large luxury tier. So now as I go to build out my comps, I can go to the STR listings. And I know this property does also, in addition to being large and luxury, it also has a pool. So that's another thing I can do, is go into the amenities and filter to just properties with a pool. I have lots of amenities I can potentially filter to. And most of these properties in Phoenix area, especially on the luxury end, are going to have pools. So that didn't actually change much. But now I can go in and start evaluating these comps. So here I see my subject property came up, is in this area. As I zoom in, I'm going to start seeing this list over here on the left start to dial in as well. And now I can start building out that comp set. So I'm going to create a new list, Paradise Valley comps. Now I can start building out that comp list, adding properties to it to be able to do that same analysis. Some of the other things I can do is, if you're actually actively managing in this market, some of the things I really like to do too is going in and monitoring forward bookings. So when are people booking? What rates are they booking for these type of properties? And you can get a sense of what dates are being booked on a most recent basis. What's fun is this data is updated daily. So every day you can sort of come in and get a sense of which days are getting booked. And then if we go down to the ADR section, you can actually see what ADRs are they getting booked at for this subset of properties that you've actually filtered to. So it can give you very clear indication of what is the demand that's out there, what is the seasonality of that demand. So we're seeing really strong bookings on the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in these 4 days. And it does, as we get into summer, looks like more and more people doing week-long bookings as well. I can go into my saved list, now look at my Paradise Valley set of comps. Here I've got three listings here. I can see how my competition is pricing different months. While I said I've got a 1,500 average daily rate, which generally aligns with my comp set, my property is generating a significantly higher occupancy level at 82%. Maybe when Francois presents, we'll get a sense of why they're able to generate that significantly higher occupancy level and when they're able to actually push rates. So it looks here during peak season in February and March, they're getting over $2,000 in average daily rate, versus in the slow season there, they're getting only $1.2 thousand. When we look at the occupancy trends, significantly higher rates and then lower occupancy levels during the off season. And that combines into the occupancy or in the RevPAR. So almost double or more than double the RevPAR in peak season than in off season. And now our final comparison, we're going to go into Norway and look deeper at this property in Bergen. So this is a market I haven't analyzed before, but it does have a very strong market score. It does look like growth overall in this market has been strong over the past few years. Not a lot of properties with pools in the Bergen submarket, but you can see here RevPAR growth of 22%, mostly on average daily rates. And the average revenue has actually increased 20% over the past year. Our property is a 4-bedroom, 1-bath, mid-scale apartment. So we're going to start our filters. We're going to go in and reset our map, look at all the properties here. Let's maybe start with the market overview. With our advanced tier, you can actually go back over 8 years of data and look at how supply has grown since 2018. So we can see supply dropped really substantially in 2021 and 2022 and has been growing very strongly. So peak season last year, 2.2 thousand listings compared to peak season in 2019 of 1.4 thousand. Being a 4-bedroom property, we see very few actually 4, 5, or 6+ bedroom properties. So I suspect that this is going to give this property a way to differentiate itself in this market. And the other thing I like to look at is demand change over time. Are we seeing demand increase or decrease? It looks like we have a very strong positive growth story for overall demand in this market. We had seen that ADRs had been up. So let me get a sense of over the past 3 years how ADRs have changed. So we see 2022 and 2023 roughly flat. 2024, we actually saw a pretty substantial increase in overall ADRs. And now as we sit in 2025, ADRs from 2025 to 2024 are only up 1%. So maybe that's the indication that rate growth is slowing, but it does allow you to really dig into those trends. So now I'm going to go in and find my comparable listings for this property. I'm going to do 3 to 4 bedroom properties, but I want to do accommodates more than 6 people. And I also want to do apartment, entire place, have that apply. See, I get down to only 279 listings now. And then on the performance side, I do want to limit maybe to economy, mid-scale, and upscale. So just get rid of the luxury and budget properties. And then I love sort of making sure I filter to only properties with 20 or more reviews, just making sure they're actually getting booked out. So now I've got 68 properties. Exciting. I see my subject property already highlighted. So I know I've got some good filters that are going to give me a good competitive set. So now I'm in the Heimby area. So I'm going to do that as my named comp set, add some properties in that I see are nearby. And that's one thing I did look. So maybe not quite in the center city, a bit off the main area here near the stadium or near the train station. So I'm going to make sure I'm finding some other properties near there. One of the cool things too is I can actually heart these on the map. So if I want to make sure I'm finding actually nearby comps, I can do that directly from the map as well. I've got my comp set. I can move here to my saved list again, go to STR listings, find that comp set, and then see how my property compares. And one of the exciting things that I can do is actually look at this every month as bookings are coming in and see how my property is comparing. So as you guys remember, my property generated an ADR of 2.5 thousand, I guess it's krona, compared to my comp set here of 3,000. But again, this one does a 59% occupancy where my subject property generated 83%. So generating higher occupancies at a slightly lower ADR. I can see how my comp set's pricing by month, occupancy by month, and RevPAR to give me some real solid comparison metrics. And then I'll just show briefly if you do have a connected listing on AirDNA, so you can go and connect your Airbnb account on a read-only basis. You can then be tracking your performance on an ongoing basis. I'm going to pull up my property that I own and manage here. And here I can see where it actually scores my performance over the next 180 days and how I'm performing actually against my comp set. I can see that I've got a 20% occupancy compared to my comp set of 24% over the next 180 days. And then what's fun is I can actually see how I'm priced out into the future, how my comp set has been booked out in the future, and then how my rates compare on any given day. So this can really help me understand, okay, if there's this period here in April where my property's not booked, then how is my property actually comparing versus my competitive set rates? And here, give me some ideas around, all right, like if I actually zoom in over this next 90-day period, like there's clearly some periods where my rate in blue is outpacing my comp set. Given that I'm not booked, that might mean that I need to maybe lower my rate a bit, given that I'm getting into the near-term booking window. So really lets you analyze your performance against that comp set that you created and let you know how you're performing. So with that, Francois, I'm going to pass it back to you.
I love it. That was awesome. And thank you so much for sharing the depth of functionalities that AirDNA can offer here when it comes to understanding what your market looks like. We picked these three locations, these three property managers, they're Enso users, and wanted to kind of showcase Keytoko in France, Good Night Stay in Phoenix, and Heimby as well. We're going to look at some of the things that these guys are doing that is different from some of the operators in their area, and also how they're growing that revenue, not just with the vacation rental arm, but with a whole new arm, which is this sort of concierge-like service or upselling strategy that they have. The numbers that Jamie shared is one part, but you can actually go further than that when you're getting all of these guests and all of these bookings. I feel like this applies potentially more when your occupancy rate or your number of bookings in a given month is higher. Is that a data point that you guys have on AirDNA, Jamie? Like number of guests staying, so average length of stay, you do, right?
Yeah, we have the average length of stay and number of days that people are actually staying in these properties. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So on the context of upsells and so on, one of the metrics that we've seen is the lower the average length of stay, the higher the number of upsells. You're basically just introducing more guests. But the counterpart to that is also higher operational costs because you got more turnover in your properties. Three of these operators that we shared today with AirDNA and Enso. First one was Jordan's 70 Properties. He's one of the managing partners at Keytoko in France. One of the cool things with Jordan is they started setting up different types of upsells. We're going to talk about these different types of upsells to enhance the guest experience and effectively not just make the current guests happy, but attract more guests. So this is an awesome quote from Jordan. One of my personal favorite clients And I shouldn't say that because I love them all, but Goodnight Stay is a phenomenal company out of Phoenix. We've met them quite a few times now, some different events that we've gone to in Phoenix. A fairly longer sales cycle on our end when it comes to convincing an operator to make the shift. But Davian and Scott and the rest of the team did make that shift and started seeing an ROI with regards to upsells as well as fees that they were charging to their guests. So different strategies around what we call operational upsells versus experiential upsells. And I'll dive into that in a bit. I believe right now they're generating roughly 120K a month on their different new revenue strategies. And then last but not least, I just had a call with him actually last week. Really fun co-founder and head of business development at Heimby out of Norway, like we showed. And they saw an 8% increase in revenue from the start, just really being able to set these new types of services that they can offer. So differentiating yourself, not just with the property, the description, the pictures, and the amenities, but also with the services that you can offer these guests. So how are they doing this? Well, there's obviously everything that we've seen through AirDNA, the images, the description, the amenities that they offer, where they're located. All of that is obviously a very important part of the booking journey of a guest. But a review was a big factor in Jamie's analysis, right? Sort of filtering out what has 20 plus reviews and so on. So it's not just relevant when your guests are booking, it's also relevant when you're starting to think about how do I compare to the rest. And what's really in those reviews, what we want to start seeing is a very seamless guest experience. Now, whether that's a digital one or not, that's up to you on how you want to run your operations, but really just providing everything on what I like to say hotel quality services in your vacation rentals. So one of the easiest ways to start growing revenue, and this is if you're a property manager versus if you're an owner, this is substantial because you keep 100% for the most part of these types of upsells. From a margins perspective, we're looking at a really interesting margin increase. It's going to be very different from your traditional, you're renting out the property and you're taking a percentage of that. So early check-ins, late checkouts, mid-stay cleanings, you guys have probably all heard these from other property managers in the industry. I always hear the same arguments. Well, I can't offer this because I don't know about my cleanings before. There's really a structure to automating this. And this involves obviously checking availabilities and so on, but it also just involves collecting payment information ahead of time, collecting requests ahead of time, and really just approving these when you know you can offer these types of operational upsells. So you get a booking and you have a sort of a gap stay in between the next booking. It may or may not make sense for you to offer to the post-stay or pre-stay offer. And these are all kind of things that we're building out at Enso. We have within our boarding pass solution, but that you can also kind of start thinking about setting up in your business. Experiential upsells is probably one of my favorite ones. It's not going to convert as highly as the operational upsells, but this is really where you can see the properties that we talked about, Goodnight Stay, Heimby, Keytoko, where they can start differentiating themselves on the market. You're not just renting out a property, you are renting out an experience, and part of that experience is staying in an awesome property. As a property manager, you are the local partner. You're the person that they trust to ask for recommendations, whether it's restaurants, local activities, museums, you name it. One of the cool things that we've introduced is Enso Experiences, over 300,000 pre-built upsells globally available, whether it's in Paris, in Phoenix, in New York, in Toronto, you name it. And we just recently actually ran a webinar with one of our PMS partners introducing this product, but also kind of introducing what's in your market. So if you guys ever have questions like, is this available in my market, which is probably the biggest one I'm getting, then feel free to send me some locations and we'll check that and cross-reference it to share what kind of upsells and experiences can be offered. We're talking passive revenue streams here. So anything that's getting booked, you just get a commission. It's fairly easy. And the same goes with transportation. This is one of the most requested experiences or upsells from guests. We're talking about convenience. They want to be in the city center, or they want to be in this nice apartment. They want ease of access, not just for their check-in experience, but also everything in between. So this is a new product that's in beta right now, Enso Transport, and just gives you that flexibility of offering different services to your guests. Last but not least, on the sort of pitch here, but also just sharing information about how to digitize that guest experience. You know, whether it's Enso's guidebooks, there's plenty of companies out there that have guidebooks. I know my marketing team's going to kill me for saying this, but it doesn't really matter who you use when it comes to guidebooks. Really having them is extremely important. So if you're still on paper guides, shift away from that. This is an opportunity for you to showcase really what's unique about your property and create that streamlined guest experience. What's going to make a slight advantage here on what we've built, we're using as part of our new guidebook editor, different AI components to pre-build them for you. I think it's because we just see property managers don't have time to do this at the depth that we've seen it be successful. Companies like Goodnight Stay, companies like Keytoko and like Heimby have taken the time to craft out content that just makes that entire experience a 5-star experience. And then that's going to reflect in how you compare yourself to the rest of the properties around. So a bit about why we chose these specific property managers. If you guys are interested in upsells and how to, start thinking about these new revenue streams and how to differentiate yourself from the other property managers, this is really a selling point that you could share during the booking of that guest, is that you don't just offer a stay, you offer an experience. So if you have any questions about how you could apply that in your business, that's what we're here for. One of the first questions I got was, are there any experiences in St. Augustine, Florida? To answer your question, Monique, yes, we do. We've got Sunset Cruise of St. Augustine. We've got dolphin and wildlife adventures, take a scenic boat ride, a guided historical tour, wine tasting cruise. There's a lot of wine tasting and a lot of cocktail and food experiences. So if anything, I might have to visit. There's a ghost tour, airboat adventures, and more. So we definitely have quite a few here. I'm seeing over 100 results for St. Augustine. Thanks for asking.
Maybe while you pause for the next question, something I forgot to mention that my marketing team will kill me about is we did provide a coupon code for anyone who's interested in subscribing to AirDNA. The code is ENSO10, building off the partnership here. So if anyone is interested in getting access to their AirDNA data, relatively cheap, offer both monthly and annual subscriptions, you can get 10% off.
Does the revenue and booking data on AirDNA come only from Airbnb data?
No. So it's a common misperception. When we are capturing the data, we're looking at calendar movements on all the major OTAs. When your calendar gets blocked off, it can be because you get booked on Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, Direct, someone call you and book, because after someone calls, anyway, someone's causing your calendar to get booked, we're capturing that. We're going to then model whether that was a booked or blocked night, and then take the last available rate from the OTAs as the revenue associated with that booking. The data that we show within AirDNA is going to be representative of all types of bookings, not just what's coming through Airbnb.
We've got another one for you here. Do you know which is more important for guests, pricing or reviews? Is it different by region? Should I focus on competitive pricing or getting 5-star reviews?
It is a fantastic question because they're so interrelated. Like your ability to get more bookings and drive higher ADRs are really dependent on the number of 5-star reviews that you're able to drive. So we've done a lot of work trying to understand like what actually leads to higher performance. And a big part of that is reviews, especially at the beginning. So your ability to get 5-star reviews keeps you higher up in the ranks on the major OTAs, Airbnb, Booking, Vrbo. They want to be bringing highly rated properties to the top. And if you are highly rated and showing at the top of the pages when people search, you're more likely to get booked. And if you're more likely to get booked, you're more likely to be able to charge a higher rate because of it. So I would say at the beginning, a real focus on 5-star reviews. And then as you get more of those reviews and see more bookings coming in, then you're able to start pushing rates, and rates are really the way to drive overall revenue long-term.
I would add to it, it's a balance between the two. We're starting to see more categories on different OTAs as they try to filter things out on what's a 5-star property. The importance of guest favorites and super hosts and these different segments that people are putting in place, the OTAs are putting in place, are the reason behind it is because people are leaving those 5-star reviews. We've got another question for you, Jamie. What mechanisms do you offer to continue to stay high in the algorithms? It is very hard to stay competitive unless you constantly change your data.
So a few things here. One is analyzing what are the amenities, what are the factors in properties that are getting booked the most. So something I look to do when I'm monitoring my market is having my submarket saved. And then I go and sort of filter and sort by number of reviews and number of occupancy and see for similar properties, what are the properties that are getting consistently booked, consistently seeing more and more reviews, and analyzing those properties for what are the factors that they have. Like, are all the properties that are continually getting booked, like, do they have a hot tub? And then your market, like only 50% of properties have hot tubs. You can then do an occupancy filter and see, okay, the hot tubs are generating 30% higher occupancy than those properties without. Consistently looking at new listings that are coming in, what amenities they have and what bookings they are getting can really help you stay competitive with a constantly changing market.
When evaluating a new property purchase that is not STR, does the estimated annual revenue shown for that market a definite, or does it depend on what you plan to offer in your new short-term rental?
That's a fun thing. So when you actually enter an address into AirDNA to estimate the revenue, it's going to go out and find comps, and it's going to estimate what you could earn based on those comps. Now it's imperative upon you of like looking at those comps, and are those comps representative of the property I'm actually going to invest in? And if they're not, one of the great things you can do now with our saved lists is you can go out and find those properties that really represent what you plan to offer in your new STR, add those into a comp set, and essentially get a custom report on what those properties aggregate forward and say that they're earning. And that, for me, is the best estimate of what my new property would earn. And essentially, to me, it's a custom rentalizer report. It can then show you what the seasonality of those properties are as you start to underwrite your investment, build out your model, and focus on what that investment could return.
How far back does AirDNA allow you to see data? You had mentioned this is a question from Anissa here.
Yeah, so there's two different types of subscriptions that AirDNA offers. Our Pro subscription gives you access to 3 years of data, and that's a rolling 3 years. What's really cool though within AirDNA is every chart within the platform, you can export the data. So if you want, like you're seeing 3 years of data, you want to make sure you have that data forever, export it. Hit the download button. You can get your market occupancy, ADRs, RevPARs. You can export all that data. And then separately, we do have an advanced subscription, which includes data going back to 2018. And that data, we're always going to keep the full history going back to 2018 available. So you can always go in and get that sort of long-term series. You can go back and compare to pre-COVID. And in there, you can actually filter to specific property managers and see how they've been performing over the past 6 to 8 years as well.
What are the top 3 factors that are going to differentiate high revenue short-term rentals from average ones? And there's a few ways to cut that answer around, but Jamie, what are your thoughts here?
Number one thing I see is amenities, design, and location. Many times, like one submarket versus another, one block versus the other can make a difference in certain type of cities. If you're in Palm Springs and you're walking distance to Coachella, can make an entirely different revenue opportunity if you're a mile away. Location, looking in of what those amenities are. So do you have a pool? Do you have a pickleball court? Do you have a hot tub? Do you have a game room? Are you really maximizing your outdoor space? Can make a big difference. And the final, design. Did you launch your property with your grandma's furniture in a home that you inherited, or actually going in and designing this for a modern traveler that wants a property that is going to feel like home to them, feel like something they actually want to bring their friends to, bring their family to? It can really make the difference between a high performing property and a weaker performing one. And that's only accelerated the difference between those over the past few years as supplies begin to increase again.
100%. And I feel like that is one of the opening remarks for a guest, right? They're looking at properties, they're filtering out, and they're looking at pictures. They're looking at that design that you mentioned. They're looking at the map. They're looking at where is it with relation to what they're trying to do and so on. I would add as well a few other factors, like pet-friendly properties tend to perform a bit better than non-pet-friendly properties. And if cleaning is a bit of a factor there, then you can add pet fees and so on to compensate for that, because I do realize there's a bit of work there. Jamie, if you've seen the same thing, or it depends on certain markets.
We've done some analysis on that. Pet friendly can really make a difference in some markets, not matter at all on others. Listings can matter in some and not others. Parking can be a really big one of, do you offer free parking to your guests? in some urban markets. For American travelers going to certain markets, just the ability to have air conditioning or not has been a big factor in certain markets. And one of the new emerging ones that we're really keeping an eye on is offering EV chargers. As more and more people are adopting EV cars, having that option to be able to easily charge your car while you're there, even if you are charging for it, it can make a big difference in sort of alleviating that fear that I'm going to get to my Airbnb or get to my short-term rental and not be able to charge my car.
How does Airbnb dynamic pricing data compare to tools like Price Labs or Wheelhouse? How can we adjust pricing to maximize earnings? And can AirDNA help analyze risk factors associated to bans or policy changes?
We do offer some dynamic pricing. What I really love, though, within the AirDNA platform, even more than our dynamic pricing, is just the ability to monitor forward bookings, as I was showing, forward rates. We do have the ability now where you can actually, with that comp set that you create, actually see the forward rates on any given day for that comp set. So you can see how they're pricing, how your prices are. So if you've got a really high demand day that is coming up, you're not booked yet, and you want to make sure you're priced above all the other competition because you know you're going to get booked, you want to get maximum ADR, you can do that. That's something that I think most people really don't know about. It's just the underlying tools. Pricing isn't a set it and forget it type of thing. It really is. You need to be analyzing your competition. You need to be looking at forward pacing, seeing what days you can really push rate, seeing what days you can really pull back. And AirDNA is a great platform to be able to do that. And then on the risk side associated with policy changes is we work very closely with a lot of both city, country, state organizations in providing data. There's a lot of the anti-short-term rental regulation groups that come in. They're not speaking to data. I'm saying short-term rentals are overrunning our city. And then just starting with the average city in the US, short-term rentals make up 0.4% of the housing stock. When you start with something like that, I'm they feel like it's overrunning our city, but it's actually not. Or that in our city, 75% of listings are actually available less than 180 days. So less than half the year. So even though there's short-term rentals in my market, is mostly people doing it part-time. They're not full-time listings. So by leveraging AirDNA data, you're really able to start providing the data to your local officials to really reframe what short-term rentals are in your area. And a lot of times that can really help, especially coming from hosts that are operating in that market, and that it's not Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking providing the data. It's a local host pulling data from a third-party platform to show what's actually happening in that market.
And a platform that's aggregating it across those 3-4 big names that you mentioned. We saw this time and time again. I mean, in Australia, there's a great community. Astra and some of the local operators there have really been able to use some of this data to showcase what's working, what's not, why they should not regulate in a certain way. We've seen this as well in Canada during that Can Stays conference where Jamie did an awesome presentation to various politicians in Canada to show that basically they were just, putting big news out there. Airbnb is killing real estate, but there may be actually different reasons behind that versus vacation rentals.
If you want to reach out to me, I'm on Twitter, Jamie_Lane. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much for joining another webinar, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again.